Hello, my mindful yogis, it's Mike. Today I'm going to do a mini workshop that's a little bit different. I'm going to focus on knees, so your knees during your yoga practice. And this is something that's really near and dear to my heart. If you've done my classes on this channel or if you've done my class in the studio, you know I'm kind of a little bit obsessed with the knees. I had two knee surgeries as a teenager, so two arthroscopic debridements of my meniscus in my knees, both meniscus in my left knee. So I was told at the time when I was 19 after the second surgery that I have, I think 30% of the cartilage left. I was told several years later by a physiotherapist that I have the osteoarthritis of a 60-year-old in this knee. So this is definitely something that is a gauge for me during my yoga practice, huge. And also I have a Baker's cyst, which is something else. And if you want to look up all of those kind of things, meniscus tear, Baker's cyst, it's a legitimate injury that I have. And it's something that really kept me restricted in my yoga practice for years when I first started. I'm about 6 years into my yoga practice now. And for the first couple of years, I really lived in a story of restriction because of my knee injuries, right? I've said, in my classes, and I've really acknowledged in the last few years that I hated my knee for a long time. I would get so angry and frustrated, and there was like anger towards the surgeons and all of these different things. They don't even do that surgery on people at that age anymore. And, it's something that has been a huge guide for me in my yoga practice and something that's really allowed me to connect with a lot of students that suffer also from knee pain and knee injuries, right? Because if you jump into this yoga practice not accommodating old injuries, then you can definitely aggravate them and then get a story that like, oh, you can't do something, or, I can't do that, I'm not strong enough, my knee restricts me, my back, my elbow, whatever it might be for you, right? And for the knees, there's a lot of lunges and a lot of poses in this practice, in the Journey into Power sequence, the Baptiste yoga that I teach. And it's just something that you want to be aware of, right? So some different things. What I'm going to do this week is I'm going to go through this mini workshop. It'll maybe be 15 or 20 minutes. And then what I'm going to also do is then do a Journey into Power sequence that's 60 minutes where I am cueing to the knees for the entire sequence. So they'll kind of go hand in hand. So after you do this mini workshop, make sure you check out the class that does the knee focus, okay? So what I want to talk about quickly is props, and I'm going to go through some of the main poses that I think you can put some focus on to help stabilize and build strength around your joints, okay? So the first thing is having a towel nearby. So a small towel like you might use just to wipe your face, that can be enough in some cases, just rolled up, being put behind the back of the knee joint, like something like a seated single leg extension. Bending the knee deeply might be uncomfortable for you, right? So putting something in the back of the knee joint actually stabilizes it a lot and allows you to put some pressure, like some squeeze into the joint without putting pressure on the front of the kneecap. I feel a huge difference there from that, right? And then the other thing can be a larger towel rolled up as well. So in something like a child's pose, for me, like I always joke, like my worst pose for me is child's pose or even just sitting back on my heels because it just hurts to put my knee into that deep of a bend, right? So what I can do in a child's pose is take something like a rolled up bath towel or a blanket, put that behind the knees, and then as I sit back, it's going to put some support into the back of the joint so I can sit back in the child's pose. The knees might be a little closer. And playing with that as well, right? If we say wide knees in child's pose in a class and then you do that and it feels kind of gross, just bring your knees a bit closer and that might take some of the sideways pressure out of the joint, okay? So that's an option. And just rolling it up. If you need a bigger roll, I do the towel in thirds and then roll it up. It just makes it a little bit more substantial if that's what you need. Blocks as well, okay? So something that I really realized early on when I was focusing on building strength around my joints is that you need to build all the muscles of the legs, right? So you can't make a joint stronger per se, like a joint doesn't have any muscles in it, right? But you can build all of the strength around the joint. So that's really like, I spent years in this, oh, I hate my knee, I can't do that, my knee is weak, I can't go that deep, I can't do this, I can't do that, right? All these stories that I had, and I made them true by living in them. And it's when I started to really challenge myself and get a bit deeper into poses, but doing it from a place of stability and really focusing on building the muscles around the legs, which is what I'm really gonna focus on in that Journey into Power class, is talking about muscle engagement throughout the legs, right? And where the placement of the knee is in a lot of poses is gonna be huge too. So let's move on with it. So we're gonna start moving into a couple of poses here. The first thing that I wanna do is come up into mountain pose. And in this workshop, I want you to feel some of these poses, and then in the flow, you'll then be able to focus on working on them, right? So the first thing I want to talk about is hyperextension. And we're going to talk about these things in Tadasana or mountain pose, okay? So if you're standing tall, that's mountain pose. Think about lengthening up through the crown of the head, drawing the shoulders back, and really putting a focus. I think I'm going to zoom here down onto my legs and just put a focus here on what you're experiencing below your waist for today, right? So the four corners of the feet we want to activate, and really getting into building the strength of the muscles of the legs by activating the muscles of the legs and engaging them. So big toe mounds, you can see my toes are off the ground. It's not about gripping, like I'm not gripping the mat with my toes. There's not tension there. It's pressing big toe mounds, pinky toe mounds. The inner ankles are drawing back, the outer ankles are drawing down. And what this is doing is activating the legs of the muscles of my legs, zipping them all the way up just from the feet. And watching out, for something like this that can happen, which is like a knock knees where the knees are kind of coming in. Just even showing you that, I can feel that in my knee. It doesn't feel good, right? And same thing too, if they're out too much, this can be something for people if your feet are turned out, that the knees go out. You want to be focusing on this like internal thigh squeezing motion, like inner rotation of the thighs, lifting up like the inner part of the knee. If you can think about that lifting upwards and really activating, taking some pressure off the kneecap. So the more you press down, the more you engage the leg muscles, the more you're going to take this pressure out of the knee, okay? And something that's really common, the reason I injured myself in my practice, not in my practice, I injured myself as a teenager jumping off a counter with a heavy box, and I landed on one leg, okay? And my knees hyperextend. So this is my bad knee. If you can see here, like maybe, I don't know if you can see that, but that's my Baker's cyst. So there's all this pressure. I have lots of fun stuff happening in there. And my mobility from one side to the other is really different. So this is my knee that I didn't injure. I can hyperextend this knee a lot, okay? And this is why I injured myself, is because I landed on my other leg with it hyperextended like this. So you can see this here, like taking all of this locking into the joint is gonna really put a lot of pressure onto the joint, and it takes a lot of work out of the muscles. So this is where my leg is straight, okay? This is straight, not this, right? You can see that probably looking at it on a camera, but just being aware that like, I was years of always locking my legs out. Like my mountain pose was locked out like this all the time, right? And the difference in mobility between the two legs with this injury, like that's as much as I can straighten my leg that's injured, and this is how much I can lock out the leg that's not injured, right? So hyperextension is really something to be aware of, and aligning so that your knees are always kind of stacked over your ankles or just a little bit in front or behind, not ever going into like a deep where your knees come in front of your toes. That's another thing to be aware of. So that's okay, a lot of words. Now I want to show some poses, okay? So the first thing that I think we want to focus on is chair. So chair is a huge one. I had a story that I can't do lunges and all of these things for years because I thought that it was going to put pressure on my joint. And that's really true if you're doing it in proper form and you're not being aware of the joints when you're doing it, right? So for me, the biggest breakthrough that I had in chair was using a block, okay? And what the block does is the block helps to activate the leg muscles and the core muscles, and it not just helps to activate them, but when you're physically putting a prop in between your legs to do a pose, you're more aware of those muscles just because there's something there, right? Like physically you feel the block, so you're thinking about that area of the body more mindfully. So what you'll want to do when you're putting the block in, you do not want to be squeezing your kneecaps into the block. That's not what we want. We want it up as close to your groin as you can get it, in the more fleshy, meaty part of your inner thigh muscles, and really squeezing those muscles into your block, okay? So what this does, when you start to come into chair pose, I'll do this from the side, when you start to sit down into chair pose, you're really gonna have to be more activated through the legs when your block is here. And as you sit down, making sure that you're not sitting down and taking the kneecaps in front of the toes. This is a really common misalignment where the knees keep coming forward the deeper you go, and like I can't even go any deeper. I feel that all through my knee. But if I'm squeezing the block, activating it, and as I sit down, I'm kind of putting a bit more weight into my heels, not all of the weight, but a bit more weight into my heels, and then letting my shin bones kind of sink back as I sit down, right? So you can see here, my knees are a little bit in front of my ankles, but they're not like way in front of my ankles over here, where it then starts to put pressure across the front of the kneecaps, okay? So sitting into chair pose and really activating and hugging the muscles of my thighs into this block, which then activates thighs, quads, all the muscles in my legs, my calves. I can feel that from my feet and my inner thighs and my core pressing and squeezing. And this here, you do this for a little while, you just keep a block nearby in your practice, grab it, put it between your thighs for chair pose. You'll build the strength in your legs and you'll be sitting deeper than ever before you know it, right? So that's number one, chair pose. The big thing too that you want to be aware of is that if you don't have a block, there's different things you can use. The towel can come in handy here, right? So a lot of people maybe don't have a block at home. You maybe don't want to grab like an encyclopedia to put between your thighs, but the towel rolled up, even this, the feet might be a bit closer with a towel, but I can still just feel like it's not as much activation, you know, if you can get it a little bit firmer, whatever it is, but just getting creative at home if you're doing this practice, that works just like the block. I can feel that. So I'm squeezing in and sitting down and really bringing that full lower body activation from squeezing to my inner thighs. Okay, so the next thing is lunges, right? Which is really where a lot of the pressure can be put into the knee if it's not being mindfully taken care of. So if you're thinking about like lunges are like the warriors, crescent lunge, triangle even, I would consider kind of a lunge when you're coming into it. So when you're getting into these lunges, the front knee is obviously something we want to be thinking about, right? But it's also, of course, the back leg. Like both legs have a knee on them, right? So you need to be thinking of both of them as you come into these poses. In a warrior one, what can happen in the back leg is like kind of a tweaking. We're saying, you know, the alignment cue would be to take your back foot just off, maybe say like, you know, just off from center, like off to like 10 o'clock or off to 2 o'clock, depending on which foot. And sometimes in my knee, that doesn't feel good. It might need to open more, right? And for some people, maybe open less, where the toes face forward. It's really, again, every knee injury is different. You might have a bad knee and have none of the same issues that I have in your knee, right? So it's just getting into that feeling out. Here I can feel there's less pressure as I start to open my toes up a little bit more to like the side, like say 3 o'clock or to 9 o'clock, right? So that's the back leg. Still micro bend. I'm not locking out the leg. I have that little bend and really thinking of the muscles of the legs, thigh muscles, calf muscles engaged. In the front leg, just like in the chair pose, you want to be really thinking about the depth of the knee as in regards to the ankle, in relation to the ankle, right? So if you're newer to the practice and you have a bad knee, like I don't like the word bad, have a knee injury or a knee issue, right? You can take the knee behind the ankle quite a bit. And your warrior one can look something like that, right? Really just building up the strength, still squaring hips, still engaging leg muscles. And as you go deeper here, right, you might need to shorten your stance. That's one thing. Take your feet a bit closer together from front to back. Another thing could be widening the feet, okay? So this can open up some space. Oh, I shifted my whole rug. You can just open up the width of your feet. Like imagine you're on train tracks a bit more. Yeah, this might not be ideal alignment for like that we would cue in regards to like most people, but if it helps to take some pressure out of the joints, then that's what you do for your body, right? And a little wider feet. This allows me now to square my hips more, which is something you want to think about in a warrior one, reaching up, right? And then again, another thing is the knee in relation to your ankle as regards to right and left, right? So I'll see if I can come on turn a little bit here to show you that. So right, you want to have the knee always over the ankle. So if it's behind or in front, that's tracking front to back. You don't want it ever to come in too much to the center towards your big toe or open too much towards your pinky toe, right? That's going to really put sideways pressure on the joint on one meniscus or the other, and you want to avoid that. You want to keep it tracking in line with the ankle, okay? And either you might have to open it up or you might have to bring it in, but depending on where your knee lands. Okay, so warrior one, warrior two. So warrior two, the back foot will tend to shift a little bit because in warrior two, it's now opening the hips, right? So the hips are coming out to the side. This can be a little bit less pressure in the front knee, but it can still be more work, right? And just, again, feeling out the depth of your lunge, feeling out the length of your stance, and then coming into it. And this is something that you really have to work on mentally, maybe a lot more than physically, like being okay with it. Maybe your lunge looks like this for a little while, and really more of a focus on, like I said at the beginning, the engagement of the leg muscles, right? So big toe mound, pinky toe, inner ankle, outer ankle, firing up the feet, pressing down, and then feeling that zippering up of the leg muscles, the bandhas, right? Like skin hugging to muscle, muscle hugging to bone. Building stability and strength around the joint is so important, okay? And just being a little bit less deep in the lunge might allow you to do that safely. You do this lunge for a few weeks or a few months, and then before you know it, right, it's deeper and deeper. And like I did warrior one like this for quite a while, right? And it's now something like people comment all the time, I have such a deep warrior two, and it's like now I can get into this on both sides pretty deep, but it's still because I've like my legs are strong, right? And they weren't this strong a few years ago, that's for sure. So be okay with that and start to build the strength. Okay, so that's the main, triangle. Triangle's an amazing one. So I often ramble about triangle in my classes because this is one of the first ones where I really felt the difference between hyperextension and not hyperextension in my legs, okay? So I had a teacher that kept coming around and poking the back of my knee. because I was locking it out so much. So I am showing you on my good side, just so that I'm not putting undue strain on this side for right now. But feeling out like in your triangle pose, basically you come from like warrior one, warrior two, you open the hips, and then we're gonna straighten out this front leg, okay? So the other reason I want to show you with this leg is because I can still hyperextend this leg to demo what you don't want it to look like, right? So triangle pose, what you often see is this, right? And just like at the beginning when I showed you, this is like my knee is now completely locked out. Okay, there's all the pressure in the joint, way less work in the muscles. The reason that we cued use a block here is because what you might not realize is like if you can't reach the ground, two things. If you can reach the ground, you're coming all the way down here and it's crunching up the side of your body, and it really makes it a lot harder to find space and open up into the leg and open up into the twist here, okay? So that's one part. If you're putting your hand on the front of your leg, if your triangle is something like this, what a lot of people are doing here without realizing is putting pressure onto the knee, right? Like you're pushing down on that leg and forcing your knee into a level of hyperextension that you don't want to be doing, okay? So one block, or I even say like if you have two blocks or a couple books, one block can be a bit unsteady on its highest height rate. So I need the highest one for me, for my legs, for the length of my arms. Like this feels the best for my body. And if I don't, if you feel a little bit unstable on the block really high, two stacked like this will be roughly the same height and a lot more stable under your fingers. So that's why we say not to put the hand on the thigh and press too much, right? And I will cue sometimes you can push your palm into the front of the shin, but you're pushing your shin back into your palm if that's where you are. It's not like dumping all of the weight into that front leg and forcing it into hyperextension, which I see a lot happen in classes. And this, if you practice 3 days a week and every day, you're coming and hitting these poses and forcing out, locking out hyperextension, you're actually damaging your joints, not building up strength and not relieving pain or anything like that whenever you do your practice. So that's the lunges. The next thing I want to talk about is a wide leg forward fold, okay? So from triangle pose in the sequence that we do normally, we would come up here, turn the feet in, right? So the feet are now parallel, and then a wide leg forward fold. So this can be really good with blocks. If you are newer to the practice, if you don't feel that your legs are that strong, something under your hands can be great. Feet a little bit less wide can be great, right? So it might be like a foot closer together than you want it to be, but this might help you really get into your leg muscles, which is the point of this, right? It's not about it being like, oh, I can get the widest split between my feet, but then you lock out your knees and cause a chronic injury, right? So taking the feet a little wider, if you have blocks or a prop, it can be here with hands down onto the blocks just to bring the ground a bit closer, right? So you're not coming all the way down and having to do weird stuff in the knees. Or if your feet can be a bit wider, it's just, again, tracking so your feet are parallel. You don't want the toes turned out too much or turned in because it puts the knees at a weird angle, right? So feet are parallel, soften through the backs of the knees. And then what I really find helps me feel this is like, imagine the inner thigh muscles lifting straight up to the ceiling. So if you're in your fold, those muscles like thigh muscles and tailbone lifting straight up, and then activation again of the feet. So big toe mound, pinky toe mound, inner ankle, outer ankle, draw down and back, take a breath in, and then feel that, soften your knees. Feel the difference, right? If you can lock out your knees, you maybe want to feel it, lock them out, and then take it out, right? Like soften again, do that a couple times. That's how I really got it in my body, was that experiencing both is important. And then starting to catch yourself as you lock out, right? And really softening, bringing work through the legs, press the feet, fire up the muscles, right? In the next side, we will often do the bind here like this, and you need your legs strong. Lift the inner thigh muscles, soften the knees, ground the outer edges of the feet, and really firing up the legs. Breathe. Take one more breath here, and then release, and just come up slowly, right? Don't force it. You want to bring your feet a bit closer. You want to avoid weird bending out to one side, like in or outward bends of the knees. You want to try to keep your feet, you say, is like true north alignment, with your feet kind of parallel as often as you can, especially with knee issues, right? Okay, so what is next? Let's come down to the stuff on the floor. So something like a pigeon pose. I already kind of talked about child's pose. Things you can do in child's pose is, again, padding. What I didn't kind of mention earlier is putting padding underneath your knees is another great thing, right? So it doesn't have to be a rolled up towel. It can just be like a folded up towel or blanket like this. And then this can feel great. So something like a child's pose, maybe that's what you need. If the front pain is in the front of your knee and not the back, then this might feel great. And you can just put that, feels actually lovely for me, right? So coming down settling into it. Child's pose for you might be with your bum way up, and almost like a puppy pose with your bum, right? So child's pose, the hips come way back onto the heels. That's about as far as I can go. Puppy pose, you just be bringing the bum up a little higher. And that, of course, takes a little bit of pressure out of the backs of and the fronts of the knees, right? And you're just feeling out, maybe your knees, again, feel better closer together. Child's pose can also be with the knees together. You can sit back, like I can get a bit deeper there, like that, right? And just feeling it out, where you can put some support, where you can put some padding. If you're at a class doing this practice and you don't have a towel handy, the other option, of course, is rolling, maybe not of course, is rolling up your mat. So if I just pull it and roll it up, I get a triple thickness of mat there, like one of those fancy thick ones. And then you can put the padding there. So again, this can be for like a child's pose. It can be for like camel as well, right? So in camel's pose, something like this is another one where just the padding under the knees might open up a lot of space for you, making sure you're keeping, again, the hips over the knees so you're not sitting back too much and putting undue pressure across the front of the kneecaps. Those are some things. Pigeon pose, okay? So let's half pigeon. That is one. And the first option here would actually be reclined pigeon. So if you have issues, so many props. If you have issues with your knees, you can come down and do reclined pigeon or thread the needle, or the same pose, right? Different name for the same thing. And if you're on your back, so this is a nice hip opener. You take the right ankle on the left knee, grab the back of the knee and start to draw into your chest. So this is a hip opening pose. This is called reclined pigeon because you get the exact same opening essentially. It's just that you're now more in control of the depth of it as opposed to gravity pushing down on the weight of your body into the pose, right? So drawing in through the left knee, pushing out through the right knee and activating there. And there's like really not any pressure happening on the knee when you do this pose. So this is a great option. If you want like more opening or you want to be in a pigeon pose for whatever reason, different things you can do to help with that. So something that, this is where a small towel might feel nice if you feel like the back knee doesn't feel good. So that's an option, right? And it might feel sometimes like you're like feeling high maintenance if you have to use 2 or 3 props to get into pose. Just drop that, right? If you're, especially you're at home, get some stuff nearby that can help you to get into the pose comfortably. So that's the first thing. Pigeon pose, like, you know, proper form, again, proper form is all relative to different people's bodies, but we would say, you know, taking the shin parallel to the top of the mat, which I can do on this side, you know, my good knee, again, but I can't do it on the other side where I have the injury. So if I need to take pressure out of the knee, it's just starting to bring the heel closer to the groin. So on one side, my pigeon will look a lot more like that, right? And just taking some pressure out of the front of the knee. Another thing that you can do here is to put the block or even a rolled up towel, right? If you have the bath towel or a blanket, just something underneath the side of the hip that's like the knee that's bent, okay? So on my right side here, I've just propped up the back there, and instead of, you know, dumping down and putting my knee into a weird sideways bend here, well, it's already in a sideways bend, but forcing it into a weird range of motion, this is really great. And it can be different things. If coming down too far doesn't feel good, use blocks, right? This could be encyclopedias or a dictionary or something, just to lift your arms up off the ground. So you're not, again, if you come all the way down here and feel like I feel there's a bit more pressure across the outside of my knee there, it's not like it's really uncomfortable for me, but if it is for you, then just a few inches higher up might make a huge difference, yeah? So I think that that's pretty much the main things I want to talk about. The last one would be Shavasana, and just being comfortable in a lying down position, right, for a few minutes when you're flat on your back. This is where the rolled up towel can be really nice, or even 2 blocks are great options. So like this, if you have a towel, you can roll that up. And just in Shavasana, like option would be blocks as well. So just something under the backs of the knees. Okay, so when you come down, if there's nothing under the backs of my knees, which like I don't always do this, but this is just nice because if I do take it out, then you can see that my knees kind of they don't go all the way into hyperextension, but they do lock out a little bit. And just taking something, it doesn't have to be very big at all, just a little bit. Blocks can be nice, kind of like a restorative way to take a Shavasana, supportive Shavasana, right? Just 2 blocks under the backs of the thighs or just above the knees. And then resting there. And really having some compassion for your body goes a long way. That was something that I needed to figure out. It took me a little while to figure it out, right? But being angry at injuries, being frustrated by the fact that your body won't do something the way that you want it to, or the way the teacher's asking you, or the way that your friend or another yogi can do it, that really takes away a lot of your power. And for me, the biggest breakthrough I had was just starting to actually love my body and start to appreciate it, right? So that took a little while for sure. And it's still not something that's a 100%, but when you start to appreciate the fact that like you're getting stronger bit by bit, instead of having these goals like I need to do that or I can't do that, that's impossible because I have this XYZ problem, starting to get curious about what you can do to modify poses for your body, where you can bring props in, where you can build strength maybe in areas that you weren't thinking about before. And you know, little bit by little bit, you start to build strength around the joints. And before you know it, those joints are stable and you can do things that you didn't think you could do, right? Like I'm stronger now at almost 40 than I was through my 20s with this injury not being taken care of. And what you're eating has a huge impact on your joints as well. So I definitely know when my diet starts to slip and I'm starting to let foods that are really inflammatory in, that has a huge impact on my yoga practice. And no matter how I modify it, I'm gonna feel that pain and inflammation if I'm not putting the right fuel into my body, right? So I hope that that helped. Please subscribe to the channel, share this with any yogis that you know that might have knee injuries or stories about their knees. And yeah, subscribe, like, share this, and I will see you again really soon. I will see you again really soon. Keep nourishing your body, keep moving your body, and stay connected to your yoga practice. Have an awesome rest of your